Turn this yacht around. Hannah Brooks did not raise her voice, yet the sentence crossed the dining room more sharply than the silverware against the china. Conversation stopped. A violinist lowered his bow. At the center of the room, Grant Holloway turned from a table of investors and looked toward the woman standing near the service doors. Hannah wore a crisp white button-up shirt and a wine-red apron tied neatly at her waist. A champagne tray rested against one hip. Nothing about her appearance suggested authority. That was why Victor Hale smiled. "Excuse me?" Grant asked. Hannah met his eyes. "The auxiliary system is cycling under load. There is an amber warning light behind the lower service corridor, and the vibration beneath the floor has repeated 3 times in less than 5 minutes." Victor gave a quiet laugh and glanced toward the guests, inviting them to share his amusement. She heard a vibration. A few people smiled politely. Hannah did not. Beyond the wide windows, the Atlantic was darkening beneath a line of heavy clouds. The yacht was almost 20 miles from the main coast, moving south through water that had begun to rise in long, uneasy swells. Inside, crystal chandeliers glowed over white tablecloths. A jazz quartet played near the bar. Everything looked controlled. Expensive. Safe. Grant adjusted the cuff beneath his ivory blazer. "Captain Hayes has the bridge. Victor manages operations. If there were a problem, they would know." "The system is trying to tell them," Hannah replied. Victor stepped forward, his expression patient in the way powerful men often became patient when they wanted someone else to feel small. "Miss Brooks, your responsibility tonight is the dining service. My responsibility is not to ignore a warning because it is inconvenient." The room changed. Not loudly. Just enough. Grant looked past her toward the investors waiting for him to return. The agreement on the table was worth more than $300 million. The evening had been planned for months. Every course, every speech, every mile of the route had been chosen to project confidence. Turning back now would look like fear. Victor seemed to understand that without being told. "The yacht passed inspection," he said. "The weather is within operating limits. We are not canceling dinner because a waitress heard a strange sound." Hannah placed the tray on the nearest service stand. It was not strange. It was consistent. She pointed toward the floor. 3 deep pulses. Then silence. That is what an overloaded auxiliary generator sounds like when a safety breaker is trying to interrupt the circuit. Grant studied her more carefully. "How would you know that?" "My father worked fishing boats out of Rockland for 27 years. Victor's smile thinned. "And that makes you an engineer?" "No. It makes me someone who learned to listen before equipment failed." For a moment, only the low music and the sea could be heard. Then Grant made his choice. He glanced once at the investors. Once at Victor. Finally, at Hannah. "Return to your tables," he said. "We will handle the yacht." Hannah held his gaze a second longer. There was no anger in her face. Only certainty. "By the time you believe me," she said, "we may not have enough light left to see each other." She lifted the tray and turned toward the service corridor. Behind her, the first flash of lightning opened the sky from horizon to horizon. A second later, something beneath the floor gave one hard metallic knock. Hannah returned to the service station, but she did not return to pretending. The jazz quartet resumed. Conversations rose again. Glasses touched beneath the chandeliers as though one dismissive order had restored the safety of the room. She moved between the tables with the same measured grace as before, refilling water and clearing plates, yet part of her attention remained beneath her feet. The yacht climbed a swell, settled, then shuddered with a dry metallic rhythm. 1 pulse. Another. A third. Hannah paused beside a table while a guest continued describing a vacation home in Palm Beach. No one else reacted. The music covered the sound. Money had a way of covering many things. Near the center table, Grant Holloway listened to Victor Hale explain the final terms of the port investment. Grant nodded, but his eyes moved briefly toward Hannah. She could not tell whether he was reconsidering her warning or merely checking that she had obeyed him. Victor noticed the glance and leaned closer to Grant. Whatever he said made the millionaire turn back toward the investors. Hannah carried an empty tray through the service doors. The warmth of the dining room disappeared behind her. In the narrow corridor, the air smelled different. Hotter. Faintly bitter. She followed the odor past the pantry and down 4 steps toward the auxiliary electrical cabinet. The amber light still blinked behind its small glass window. On. Off. On. Off. Not a decorative signal. A request. Hannah tried the cabinet handle. Locked. She crouched and looked through the ventilation slots. Inside, a thick cable trembled each time the generator cycled. A dark mark spread across the insulation near the breaker. Then she saw the copper wire. Someone had wrapped it around the safety lever, holding the breaker in place so it could not trip. Her father's voice returned from years earlier, spoken above the engine noise of a weathered fishing boat. Machines do not lie, Hannah. People do. She took out her phone and photographed the cabinet through the narrow opening. The screen captured the blinking warning light, the scorched cable, and the wire forcing the breaker closed. Another vibration moved through the deck. Stronger this time. A stack of clean dessert plates rattled on the shelf behind her. Hannah stood and headed toward the crew passage leading to the bridge, but Victor stepped through the doorway before she reached it. He closed the door behind him. His expression remained polite. His eyes did not. You were told to return to service. Hannah held up her phone. The auxiliary breaker has been disabled. Victor did not look at the image. You entered a restricted corridor. The door was open. Then it will be locked. He moved to pass her. Hannah remained where she was. Who secured the breaker with copper wire? For the first time, Victor's face changed. Only slightly. A tightening near the mouth. Then the calm returned. Old equipment sometimes requires temporary measures. A safety system is not optional. Neither is following instructions. Rain began striking the hull in scattered taps. Victor lowered his voice. Mr. Holloway has spent months preparing this evening. You will not embarrass him in front of his partners because you grew up around fishing boats. Hannah looked at the photograph on her phone. This is not about embarrassment. Everything tonight is about appearances. Victor reached for the device, but Hannah moved it behind her back. Captain Hayes needs to see this. Captain Hayes reports to me. The ocean does not. A deeper knock sounded beneath them. The corridor lights dimmed for half a second, then returned. Victor glanced upward before he could stop himself. Hannah saw the fear he had hidden from the dining room. She stepped around him. You already knew, she said. He caught up at the service door. You will finish your shift and say nothing more. Hannah opened the door. Warm music spilled into the corridor. I will finish my responsibility, she replied. Across the dining room, lightning flashed against the windows. This time, the chandeliers flickered with it. Grant Holloway saw the chandeliers flicker, but Victor Hale spoke before anyone else could react. A brief voltage adjustment, he said, smiling toward the investors. The backup system is compensating exactly as designed. The explanation arrived quickly. Too quickly. Hannah crossed the dining room with her phone in one hand and the scorched copper wire in the other. She stopped beside Grant's table and placed the wire on the white linen between the crystal glasses. A dark burn mark stained one end. This was holding the safety breaker closed, she said. Grant looked at it, then at Victor. Is that true? Victor did not hesitate. A temporary maintenance measure. The system has been stable for weeks. Hannah held out her phone. The cable insulation is already overheating. Grant studied the photograph. The amber warning light glowed behind the cabinet window. The breaker lever was clearly bound in place. Around him, the investors had stopped discussing the contract. He could feel their attention shifting from the document to him. The evening was no longer a celebration. It was becoming a test of control. Victor leaned closer. "Grant, we are less than an hour from the planned turnaround point. Captain Hayes has reported no navigation issues. If we interrupt the trip now, every person in this room will assume the yacht is unsafe." Hannah looked at Grant. "It is unsafe." The words were simple. That made them harder to dismiss. Grant rose from his chair. "Where is Captain Hayes?" "On the bridge," Victor replied. "Handling the weather." "Then I want him here." Victor's expression remained calm, but his hand tightened around the back of a chair. "There is no reason to pull the captain away from his duties." Grant noticed. Hannah did too. "I will go to him," she said. Victor stepped into her path. "You will do no such thing." Grant's voice sharpened. "Move." Victor turned toward him, surprised. For a moment, the balance shifted. Then a waiter entered from the service corridor and whispered that the lower refrigeration units had stopped. Victor used the interruption immediately. "A separate circuit." "Nothing more." Hannah picked up the scorched wire. "Nothing about this is separate." She walked toward the bridge access door. Grant followed. Victor had no choice but to come with them. The corridor narrowed as they climbed. Rain struck the windows harder now, no longer scattered taps but a steady rush. The yacht rolled beneath their feet. Grant caught the railing. Hannah did not. She adjusted her balance before the deck moved, as if she had felt the swell arrive through the floor. At the bridge, Captain Robert Hayes stood over the navigation display with two crew members. Gray hair framed a face made serious by years at sea. He looked up when Hannah entered. "Sir, guests are not permitted here." "She is staff," Grant said. "And she found this." Hannah showed him the photograph and the wire. The captain's expression changed before he could hide it. "You knew," she said. Hayes looked toward Victor. "I requested a full electrical inspection 3 days ago." Grant turned slowly. "And?" "It was postponed." Victor folded his arms. "The inspection schedule was moved because the yacht passed its last service review." Hayes looked at him. "The auxiliary breaker failed twice during harbor testing." Silence filled the bridge. Grant's face hardened. "You told me everything was cleared." "It was operational." "That is not what I asked." Outside, lightning flashed across the dark water. The navigation screen dimmed, then returned. A warning tone sounded once. Captain Hayes reached for the radio. "We are turning back." Victor stepped forward. "You will jeopardize the agreement over a minor electrical irregularity?" Grant looked toward the storm, then toward the investors visible through the glass doors below. For months, he had trusted Victor to protect the company from risk. Now he saw the scorched wire in Hannah's hand and understood that the risk had been protected from him. "Turn us around," Grant said. Captain Hayes reached for the controls. The bridge lights went out for 3 full seconds. In the darkness, the yacht continued forward. When the lights returned, the navigation display was black. The bridge remained dark except for the red glow of the emergency indicators. Captain Hayes pressed the backup controls, but the navigation screen did not return. Outside, rain swept across the windshield in heavy sheets, erasing the horizon. The yacht rolled to port, then corrected slowly as the captain moved to the manual helm. "Main power is down," he said. "Auxiliary power is unstable." Grant looked toward Victor. "You said it was operational." Victor's answer came after half a second too long. "It was." Hannah heard the distinction. "Not safe. Not repaired. Only operational." Another warning tone sounded from somewhere below. This one did not stop. Captain Hayes reached for the radio. Static answered. He tried a second frequency. Nothing. External communications are offline, he said. Global positioning is gone too. Grant stepped toward the dark display. How far are we from shore? Hayes glanced at the magnetic compass mounted above the console. Just under 18 miles. The wind is pushing us southeast. Hannah looked through the side window. A flash of lightning revealed white water beyond the glass and the dark rise of waves gathering off the starboard side. What is southeast? She asked. The captain did not answer immediately. Shallow water and a line of submerged ledges. Victor straightened. Then use the backup generator. Hayes looked at him with open disbelief. The backup generator is what failed. Below them, the dining room erupted in voices. Without music, lighting, or air circulation, the room had changed from elegant to unfamiliar. Guests moved toward the windows. Several reached for their phones, only to find no signal. A glass fell and shattered. Then another. Hannah turned toward the stairs. They are all moving to the same side. Captain Hayes nodded. Get them centered. Keep them away from the lower corridors. Grant followed her down. Victor stayed on the bridge. The dining room was lit only by emergency strips near the floor and the blue-white flashes outside. People were speaking over one another now. Someone demanded an explanation. Someone else called for the crew. The yacht leaned again as too many guests crowded near the port windows. Hannah climbed 2 steps onto the service platform and raised one hand. Everyone, stop moving. No one listened. Grant stepped forward. Please remain calm. His voice disappeared beneath the noise. Hannah looked at the chandelier above them, then at the polished serving tray still resting on a side table. She lifted the tray and struck it once with the handle of a serving spoon. The clear metallic note cut through the room. Every face turned. Stand where you are, she said. Place one hand on the shoulder of the person in front of you. Move toward the center aisle in groups of 4. No one runs. No one uses the lower staircase. Her tone was not loud. It was certain. The guests began to obey. Grant watched as the room reorganized around her instructions. The woman he had ordered back to her tables was now the only person the tables were listening to. Hannah pointed toward the storage cabinets. Life jackets are beneath the rear benches. Mr. Holloway, take the right side. Start with the older guests. Grant stared at her for one brief moment. He was not accustomed to being assigned a task in his own room. Now, Hannah said. He moved. Together, they opened the cabinets and passed out the orange jackets. The yacht pitched again, harder this time. A low rush of water sounded beneath the floor. Hannah froze. Not from fear. From recognition. She looked toward the service corridor. That is not rain, she said. Captain Hayes appeared at the top of the stairs with a flashlight. We have water entering through the lower ventilation intake. The electric pumps are offline. Victor came behind him. We still have enough reserve power to restart the central server. Hayes turned on him. The server is not keeping this yacht afloat. Victor looked toward Grant. The contract files are on that system. If they are not transmitted tonight, the partners can walk away. Hannah stepped into the emergency light, her white shirt damp at the cuffs, her wine-red apron still tied neatly. How much reserve power is left? Enough for one major system, Hayes said. Either the bilge pumps or the emergency radio relay. Not both. The room fell silent again. This time, no one looked at Victor. They looked at Grant. Grant looked from the dark windows to the people wearing bright orange life jackets beneath the silent chandeliers. Victor moved closer, lowering his voice as though the decision belonged only to men who understood money. The agreement expires at midnight. If the files do not reach the investors, Holloway Group loses $300 million and the port project collapses. Captain Hayes held the flashlight between them. If the pumps do not start, the water keeps rising. Grant turned toward Hannah. She did not plead with him. She did not remind him that she had warned everyone. She simply listened to the water moving beneath the floor. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Before the lower electrical compartment is affected?" Hayes glanced at his watch. "Maybe 20 minutes. Less if the intake opens wider." Victor stepped forward. "The server needs only 4 minutes." Hannah looked at him. "And if the reserve fails during those 4 minutes?" "It will not." "You said that about the generator." Victor's expression tightened. Grant stared at the contract folder on the nearest table. Months of negotiations. Hundreds of jobs. A public victory large enough to reshape his company. Then he looked at the guests standing in frightened silence, waiting for him to decide whether their safety mattered more than his reputation. "Power the pumps," he said. Victor's face changed. "Grant, think carefully." "I am." Grant removed the executive access card from Victor's hand and gave it to Captain Hayes. "Use everything available to keep the yacht stable." For the first time that evening, Victor had no immediate answer. The captain nodded and turned toward the lower corridor. Hannah followed him. Grant started after them, but she stopped at the stairs. "Stay here." He frowned. "This is my yacht. Then take care of the people on it." She pointed toward the life jacket cabinets. "Check every strap. Keep everyone centered. Make sure no one goes below." Grant looked as though he wanted to argue. Then he saw an elderly guest struggling with a buckle and moved toward her instead. Hannah and Captain Hayes descended into the service corridor. The emergency strips along the floor cast a weak red line through the darkness. Water covered the soles of Hannah's shoes now, cold and moving steadily toward the electrical compartment. The sound grew louder near the ventilation intake. Hayes opened the pump access panel and found the controls unresponsive. "The motor needs reserve power, but the transfer switch is not engaging." Hannah aimed the flashlight inside. A thin copper tie had been twisted around the manual release, matching the wire she had found upstairs. "Someone blocked this one too." Hayes stared at it. "That is not temporary maintenance." "No," Hannah said. "It is a pattern." She used a pair of insulated pliers from the emergency cabinet to loosen the wire while Hayes prepared the transfer switch. Above them, the yacht rolled, and water shifted across the floor in a sudden rush. Hannah steadied herself against the wall. "Ready?" she asked. Hayes placed one hand on the control. "Ready." She pulled the wire free. He moved the switch. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then a deep mechanical hum traveled through the deck. The first pump began drawing water from the compartment. A second indicator remained dark. "Only one is running," Hayes said. "It may be enough to slow the rise, but not stop it." Hannah looked toward a small maintenance screen beside the panel. Unlike the main controls, it still held a faint green glow. Lines of service records moved across it. 3 failed harbor tests. 2 overheating warnings. 1 authorization overriding the automatic shutdown. Victor Hale. Hannah took out her phone and photographed every line. A voice came through the crew intercom above them. Victor's voice. "Calm again. Grant, the investors are asking whether the documents can still be transmitted." Hannah looked at the water around her shoes, then at Victor's electronic approval on the screen. The storm had not created the danger. It had only removed the lights that helped him hide it. Hannah held the phone beneath the maintenance screen until every record was captured. Captain Hayes studied the frozen approvals beside Victor Hale's name, then looked toward the ceiling as the intercom repeated his request. "He knew the breaker was failing," Hayes said. "He overrode the shutdown 3 times." Hannah placed the phone in the dry pocket of her apron. "Then we stopped treating this like an accident." The first pump continued to hum, but the water still moved across the floor in shallow waves. Hayes checked the pressure gauge. "It is slowing the rise, not clearing it. We need the second pump." Hannah aimed the flashlight toward the inactive unit. Its manual control was mounted behind a narrow steel panel. She opened it and found the release handle secured with another copper tie. Victor had not hidden the problem in one place. He had built his certainty into every safeguard. "Insulated cutters," she said. Hayes handed them over. Hannah worked carefully, keeping her hands clear of the damp housing. Above them, Grant's voice came through the intercom. "Hannah, report." She pressed the wall button. "One pump is running. The second was also disabled. Captain Hayes and I are restoring it now." A pause followed. "Was it intentional?" Grant asked. Hannah looked at Victor's name on the screen. "Yes." The word traveled through the yacht. In the dining room, Grant stood beside the life jacket cabinets while every investor heard the answer. Victor moved toward the intercom panel. "She is making assumptions based on records she does not understand." Grant stepped between him and the controls. "Then explain your authorization." Victor kept his expression composed. "The shutdowns were false alarms. The yacht would never have left the marina if I had not cleared them." "That was the point of the alarms," Grant said. Victor lowered his voice. "The agreement depended on tonight. You told me failure was not an option." Grant looked at him for a long moment. "I meant the deal. There is no difference at this level." Grant glanced across the room at the guests he had spent the evening trying to impress. Then he looked toward the dark floor beneath which Hannah was working. "There is now." Below deck, the copper tie came free. Hannah nodded to Hayes. He engaged the manual release. The second pump shuddered, stopped, then started with a deeper, steadier rhythm. Water began drawing away from the electrical compartment. Hayes watched the gauge fall. "That gives us time." "Not direction," Hannah said. The yacht still drifted southeast, pushed toward the submerged ledges. Hayes checked the handheld compass clipped to his jacket. "We can steer manually from the bridge, but without position data we do not know how close we are." Hannah looked at the emergency cabinet. A portable marine radio rested behind a clear cover. "Does that unit have its own battery?" "Yes, but the storm will limit range. We do not need the entire coast. We need one vessel close enough to hear us." Hayes removed the radio and tested it. Static filled the corridor. Then a faint voice broke through and vanished. Hannah listened. Again. He adjusted the channel. Another burst of static. This time, a few words emerged. "Coast Guard Weather Advisory. Sector Broadcast." Hayes looked at her. "They are transmitting. Receiving us is another question." Hannah studied the power panel. "Can we transfer reserve power to the radio relay for 30 seconds without stopping the pumps?" "Not through the main system." "What about the galley service circuit?" Hayes frowned. "It is isolated from navigation. But it still has emergency battery power for the crew intercom." He understood. "Enough for a signal boost." They hurried back upstairs. In the dining room, Grant was tightening the final life jacket strap around an elderly guest. His ivory blazer was damp at the shoulders, his hands no longer clean. Hannah crossed toward him. "We can send one strong distress call, but we need complete silence and an accurate heading." Grant nodded immediately. "No questions. No resistance." He turned to the room. Everyone remained still. Victor stepped forward. The contract server could use that same circuit. Grant removed the access card from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "You already chose what mattered to you." Then he looked at Hannah. "Tell us what to do." For the first time that night, the millionaire did not command the room. He gave it to the woman who had heard the danger before anyone else was willing to listen. Hannah placed the portable radio on the service counter and looked toward Captain Hayes. "What heading are we holding?" Hayes checked the handheld compass. 140 degrees, drifting farther southeast. "And the nearest safe water?" "Northwest, but we need help before we can correct without position data." Hannah turned to the guests. When the transmission begins, no one speaks. No phones. No movement near the service panel. The room obeyed. Even the investors who had spent the evening measuring power in numbers now stood quietly beneath the emergency lights. Grant moved beside Hannah. What do you need from me? Keep Victor away from the circuit. Victor gave a restrained laugh. You are trusting a waitress with emergency communications. Grant faced him. I am trusting the person who has been right every time tonight. The words landed without drama. That made them stronger. Hannah opened the galley service cabinet. Inside, a small emergency battery fed the crew intercom and refrigeration alarms. Captain Hayes connected the radio relay to the isolated circuit while Hannah watched the power indicator rise. 20%. 35. 40. That is enough for one attempt, Hayes said. Maybe two if the battery holds. Hannah looked at Grant. The distress message needs the yacht name, approximate position, heading, number of people aboard, and the nature of the emergency. Grant nodded. You should send it. The captain should. His voice will carry authority. Hayes lifted the microphone. Static filled the room. Hannah held one finger in the air. Wait. Beneath the interference, she heard a repeating tone from the weather broadcast. Then a brief opening. Now. Hayes pressed transmit. United States Coast Guard, United States Coast Guard, this is Motor Yacht Meridian Star. We are approximately 18 miles southeast of Rockland, Maine, heading 140 degrees and drifting. Main navigation and external communications have failed. We have 32 people aboard, water entering the lower compartment, and limited reserve power. Request immediate assistance. Static answered. The battery dropped to 27%. No reply. Victor looked toward the server access port. You have enough power for the contract files. Grant stepped in front of him. Do not touch it. Hannah kept listening. The radio hissed. Then a broken voice emerged. Meridian Star, repeat your position. Hayes reached for the microphone, but the relay light flickered. 12%. Hannah moved to the service panel and disconnected the dining room refrigeration circuit. The display rose to 19. You will lose the food storage, Victor said. We are trying not to lose the yacht, she replied. Hayes transmitted again. This time, the Coast Guard confirmed the call. A rescue vessel was already responding to the storm 7 miles west of their estimated position. They were instructed to maintain heading, activate visual signals, and prepare for guidance. Relief moved through the room, but Hannah did not smile. We still have to keep clear of the ledges. Captain Hayes nodded. I can steer manually, but I need someone watching the pump pressure and someone maintaining balance in the dining room. Grant spoke before Hannah could assign him. I will stay with the guests. Victor looked at him. You are letting her run your yacht. Grant tightened a loose life jacket strap around a young guest's shoulders. No. I am finally letting the right person do the right job. Hannah and Hayes returned to the bridge. Lightning revealed the sea in brief white fragments. The magnetic compass showed the yacht continuing southeast. Hayes moved the manual helm, but the response was slow. We need more weight centered aft, Hannah said. Grant relayed the instruction below, organizing the guests without argument. The yacht began to answer the helm. Not much. Enough. On the bridge, a secondary maintenance display blinked to life for a moment. Hannah saw the same failed test record she had photographed, followed by a new line. Remote override request. Victor Hale. Captain, she said, he is trying to regain control of the transfer system. Hayes looked toward the corridor. Can he stop the pumps? Not if we remove his access. Hannah took out her phone and showed Grant's executive card reflected in the bridge camera feed. Victor had lifted it from the table during the transmission. Below, Victor stood near the service console, pretending to check on a guest. Hannah pressed the intercom. Mr. Holloway, look at Victor's left hand. Grant turned. The room went quiet again. Victor slowly opened his fingers. The access card lay in his palm. Grant held out his hand. Give it back. Victor did not move. The company will lose everything. Grant looked around at the 32 people waiting beneath the emergency lights. No, he said. For the first time tonight, it will not. Victor looked at the access card in his palm as though it were the last piece of authority he still owned. Grant kept his hand extended. Give it back. Around them, the guests remained silent. No one looked toward the dark windows now. They were watching the man who had spent the evening insisting everything was under control. Victor placed the card on the table. Slowly. Carefully. You are making a permanent mistake, he said. Grant picked it up. The permanent mistake was trusting you after the first warning. On the bridge, Hannah watched the remote override request disappear from the maintenance screen. Captain Hayes adjusted the manual helm another 5 degrees northwest. The yacht responded with a low turn through the water. Outside, lightning revealed a line of white foam breaking over submerged ledges less than half a mile away. We are too close, Hayes said. The current is stronger than the rudder response. Hannah checked the pump pressure. Both units were operating, but the reserve indicator had fallen into the red. How much steering time do we have? Maybe 6 minutes before the manual assist loses pressure. A voice broke through the portable radio. The rescue vessel had their signal and was approaching from the west. Its crew instructed them to activate a flare and hold the safest possible heading. Hannah opened the emergency locker and found a waterproof signal case. I will take it aft. Hayes shook his head. The deck is unstable. The guests need you here. She moved through the corridor, one hand on the railing as the yacht climbed another swell. Grant met her near the rear door. What are you doing? Giving the rescue vessel something to see. He looked at the flare case. I will go. You have 32 people waiting for you to remain useful. The words carried no insult. Only direction. Grant nodded and opened the inner door while 2 crew members secured the safety line around Hannah's waist. Rain struck her face the moment she stepped outside. She moved carefully toward the aft rail, keeping low, each step measured against the motion of the deck. The sea was almost black. Then, far to the west, a white searchlight appeared between the waves. Hannah raised the flare and activated it. Red light opened above the yacht, bright enough to turn the rain into falling glass. The rescue vessel answered with 2 flashes. Inside, the guests saw the light through the windows and released one shared breath. Hannah returned to the bridge soaked at the sleeves, her wine-red apron darkened by rain. They have us, she said. Hayes nodded toward the compass. Now we keep ourselves off the ledges long enough for them to reach us. The hydraulic pressure dropped again. The wheel stiffened beneath his hands. Grant joined them with 2 crew members. Tell us what to do. Hayes assigned them to the manual steering assist below the console. Grant removed his ivory blazer, folded it over a chair, and took his place beside the crew. Each turn required all 3 of them. No title made the wheel lighter. No amount of money changed the current. Hannah monitored the compass, the pump gauges, and the approaching searchlight. 2 degrees west, she said. They turned. Hold. The yacht shuddered, then steadied. The foam line passed along the starboard side, close enough to see, far enough to survive. Victor stood at the bridge entrance, watching the people he had dismissed work together without him. The maintenance records do not prove intent, he said. Hannah lifted her phone. The photographs show the copper ties. The system log shows your authorization. The captain's request shows you refused the inspection. Grant looked at Victor, breathing hard from the manual controls. The storm did not cause this. Hannah met Victor's eyes. It only made the truth impossible to hide. The rescue vessel came alongside 10 minutes later and established a tow line. Emergency power began returning in narrow sections. First the bridge instruments. Then the corridor lights. Finally, one row of chandeliers glowed above the dining room. No one cheered. They simply looked toward Hannah as she stood beside the restored control panel, water on her cuffs, oil on her hands, and the same quiet expression she had worn when no one believed her. The Meridian Star reached the marina shortly after sunrise, guided by the rescue vessel through calmer water. The storm had moved east, leaving the harbor beneath a pale gray sky. On the dock, emergency crews waited beside company representatives, marine investigators, and several reporters who had already heard that Grant Holloway's private yacht had lost power offshore. The guests stepped onto land one by one, still wearing orange life jackets over evening clothes that no longer looked important. No one complained about the ruined dinner. No one mentioned the unsigned agreement. Their attention remained on Hannah Brooks as she helped an older couple across the boarding ramp before stepping ashore herself. Her white shirt was wrinkled, her wine-red apron stained with seawater and machine oil, but her posture remained composed. Captain Hayes followed with the maintenance log, the scorched copper ties, and printed copies of the override records. Victor came last, accompanied by 2 company security officers. He was not restrained, but he was no longer permitted near the yacht's systems or corporate files. Grant stood at the end of the dock in his damp ivory blazer. When Victor approached, Grant did not raise his voice. "You are suspended from every position in Holloway Group, effective immediately." Victor looked toward the waiting investors. "You are destroying the company over one difficult night." Grant glanced back at the crew unloading emergency equipment. "You endangered people to protect an appearance. That is not leadership." Victor's expression hardened. "You gave the order that failure was unacceptable. And you decided people were acceptable losses." Grant stepped aside. "The investigators will decide the rest." Victor walked toward the marina office without another word. Several weeks later, the Marine Safety Report confirmed what Hannah had seen before the first lightning strike. The auxiliary system had failed 3 harbor tests. Victor had postponed the inspection, authorized the disabled breakers, and ordered the maintenance team to classify the warnings as minor irregularities. The storm had intensified the failure, but it had not created it. Holloway Group lost the port agreement. Grant accepted responsibility publicly. He replaced the operations board, compensated every crew member, and paid for independent inspections of every vessel connected to the company. Then he invited Hannah to his office overlooking the harbor. She arrived in the same white shirt she wore to work, without the apron this time. Grant offered her a position in the company's new maritime safety division, along with a salary greater than anything she had imagined. Hannah read the offer, then placed it on the desk. "There is one condition." Grant nodded. "Name it." "Every employee, from the captain to the newest server, must have the authority to stop a voyage when they identify a credible safety concern. No permission from an executive. No punishment for delaying a schedule." Grant looked at her across the desk. Months earlier, he might have called the demand impractical. Now he remembered 32 people standing in darkness, waiting for someone to choose them over a contract. "Agreed," he said. Hannah accepted the position only after the policy had been signed and distributed to every employee. On her first day, Grant took her aboard the repaired Meridian Star. The chandeliers were bright again. The navigation screens worked. Every breaker had been replaced. Near the service corridor, a new emergency panel had been installed at eye level, visible to crew and staff alike. Beneath it was a simple engraved message: "Every warning deserves to be heard." Grant looked toward Hannah. "You were brave that night." She studied the quiet machinery below the floor. "The storm did not make me brave," she said. "It only made everyone else quiet enough to listen."